Shalom, everyone. This is Michael, one of the instructors at RPK. Our lesson tonight is going to be based around Isaiah 66:17 and Daniel 12:1 and 2. If you like the lesson that we're having tonight, follow us on RPK Resurrection Prophecy Kingdom on YouTube and AOSD Chandler, CHANDLER, and also check out our articles at resurrectionprophecykingdom.live. And I'm going to be handing the floor over to Elvin Israel.
And before you do, my brother, can you also give them your YouTube channel?
Oh, yeah, that's right. The most important YouTube channel you can follow is Not Made with Hands.
Indeed. All praise to the Most High. And thank you for the introduction as usual. Wonderful. So as the brother already proclaimed, that we're going to be speaking on Isaiah 66:17 as well as Daniel 12:1 and 2. But I want to start at the underlining information of what's going on in Daniel 12 as well as Isaiah 66. I want to start where Moses started it. The beginning, the foundation, which was, if anybody knows, RPK, AOSD, not made with hands. We're the first to proclaim that the Bible itself has three major and main tenets that I always piggyback off of. That would be the garden narrative, that would be the flood narrative, and that would be the Exodus narrative. Those three narratives, all created by the same author, Moses, and then we know the scribes and et cetera, came in and doctored how they wanted to, but the same thought created by one author, Moses. So why wouldn't Moses leave these accounts? Because if you know anything about ancient Eastern literature, especially in the Near East, they always had a flood narrative. They always had a creation narrative. They always had a war narrative. So, what did Moses do with those narratives that he already knew about? How did he make it fit the Israelite community? We're going to start with the Garden of Eden because for some reason, people want the Garden of Eden to be something more than what Moses proclaimed it to be. Now, is there a rest place? Is there an Eden-like scenario in the heavenlies? I would say yes, because Moses went up on the mountain and he saw something, saw a lot of things, and then he came down and created what we call the Torah. So I believe he saw something, but is that the narrative that he's spinning in the Torah that we have today? Well, I will quote or paraphrase from Philo, the Alexandrian Jew, who it was said his brother was the high priest. I will quote from him to say that these stories are allegorical in nature, meaning they stand for something else. And according to Philo, the Garden of Eden was in fact a mindset for mankind. Once again, the Garden of Eden was a mindset that mankind was supposed to be in, dealing with whether there was going to be take the route of following the Father, being displaying virtue, or was they going to take the route of the Satan or devices, their own personal pleasure? So today we're going to see if this place is actually the Garden of Eden, is it actually a central location like many people teach today, or is it the state of being, a mindset, like we have an ancient Israelite, an ancient Jew saying? So we're going to find out. And we're going to start it in the book of Romans. So Brother Mike, can you start us off, please?
Sure, just give me one one moment here. And I'm going to be pulling out of Romans 5:14-19. Romans 5:14-19. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over them that had not sinned, after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who is the figure of him that was to come. But not as the offense, so also is the free gift. For if through the offense of one many be dead, much more the grace of God and the gift by grace, which is by one man Jesus Christ, hath abounded unto many. And not as it was by one that sinned, so is the gift. For the judgment was by one to condemnation, but the free gift is of many offenses unto justification. For if by one man's offense death reigned by one, much more they which receive abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness shall reign in life by one Jesus Christ. Therefore,
was that the last one?
That was 17. I got
Okay.
Therefore, as by the offense of one judgment came upon all men to condemnation, even so by the righteousness of one the free gift came upon all men unto justification of life. For as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, so by the obedience of one shall many be made righteous.
So there we have Paul alluding back to
Alright, I think he lost reception there. I'm trying to get him back. Dave, what's going on, brother? All right, you're back, Elvin.
hopefully it doesn't do that a lot. My phone have a tendency to do that. Work with. So we have death through Adam, life through Christ. And we have the reigning from Adam all the way up into Moses, but Christ was the one that was going to bring life. So we have the scenario of death and life. So we have to find out how exactly did death reign. What was Paul talking about? He said through Adam all died. So we have to go to the beginning to find out exactly what he's speaking on. So, Britt, can you read that in Genesis chapter 2 and 3?
Genesis chapter 2 and 3. Genesis chapter 2 verse 3 says, "And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it..."
Oh, no. It's the verses that said what's now?
It's 8 and 9.
Oh, that's what... Okay, that's what I originally was going to go by. I thought you meant something different. Okay. Genesis 2, 8, and 9. "And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he had put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil." Verse 15. And the Lord God took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Okay. Genesis 3, 1 through 8. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. Okay. Verse 22. Okay. Verse 22 through 24. And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life.
So what Britt just read is the foundation of the entire Bible, from Genesis through the book of Revelation, all non-canonical, from Enoch, Jubilee, from all the works of Philo, from the works of Josephus, from all of your 12 patriarchs, all of those things that they call non-canonical that was written about, the whole entire structure is speaking on what Rick just read right there in Genesis. The problem is people don't understand what was being said. They read the story literally, they take it literally, they keep going with it, they really don't even bring up what it meant. Then all of a sudden they start talking about Moses, then they start talking about David, then they start talking about Christ. They just skip over a whole lot, not knowing Moses started the Torah off with that story for a reason. And tonight, we're going to show you what their reason is. And Isaiah 66:17 and Daniel 12 uses this same exact reason, the same exact mode. You're going to see how they was actually talking about the same thing that Moses was talking about in the Garden of Eden. But the first thing first, and sorry if I'm talking so loud, I got a lot of rain in my background, so I don't know if you guys can hear me or not. So the first thing first, we're going to dissect this Garden of Eden. So, Brother Mike, can you read all of the verses in 1 Kings, chapter 6 and 7? Every verse in 1 Kings, that's on the west now. We're going to dissect this Garden of Eden because a lot of people don't know what that's talking about. So we're going to dissect.
All right, 1 Kings 6:1, and it came to pass in the 418th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. And then verse 27 to 30. And he set cherubims within the inner house, and they stretched forth wings of the cherubims, so that the wing of the one touched the wall, and the wing of the other cherubim touched the other wall, and their wings touched one another in the midst of the house. And he overlaid the cherubims with gold, and he carved all the walls of the house round about with carved figures of cherubims and palm trees and open flowers within and without. And the floor of the house he overlaid with gold within and without. Verse 35. And he carved thereon cherubims and palm trees and open flowers, and covered them with gold fitted upon the carved work. All right. And then chapter 7. Just give me a moment. Chapter 7, verse 6 through 7. And he made a porch of pillars. The length thereof was 50 cubits, and the breadth thereof 30 cubits. And the porch was before them, and the other pillars and the thick beam were before them. Then he made a porch for the throne, where he might judge, even the porch of judgment, and it was covered with cedar from one side of the floor to the other. Verse 42 through 44, and 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, even 2 rows of pomegranates for 1 network, to cover the 2 bowls, and of the chapiters there were upon the pillars, and the 10 bases and 10 basins, and all the vessels which Hiram made to King Solomon for the house of the Lord were of bright brass.
Okay, then we got the is it included about the oxen in there? The seeing the oxen.
No. I don't see the oxen in there. In the 10 base and the potsoils, basins. No.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay then. And you ran down to the oxen, the seeing the oxen, right?
I don't see the oxen in the no, I read 42 to 44, but I don't see the oxen in there. Or maybe I'm bugging.
No, I might have left it out. But it had sea and oxen also around that inside of the temple. But the point of it is, he's expounding on building the house of the Lord, which was the temple. But notice, he carved cherubim on the wall. He carved palm trees and pomegranates on the wall. He carved, and I think it was pomegranates, but I know he also carved flowers on the wall. So, Brother Mike, what is that putting you in the mind of? We got flowers, we got the palm trees, we got cherubim. What does that put you in the mind of?
That make me feel like I'm in the garden.
That's exactly what it is. That's the Garden of Eden. the Garden of Eden. So you have the replica of the Garden of Eden. So when they are in the temple, they're inside the Garden of Eden. In fact, you got the throne room right there in the temple, where you have the throne room right there in the Garden of Eden. So that will be something that we can touch on at a later time. But this is all about the Garden of Eden. So now, within the Garden of Eden, as Sister Britt read earlier, you have something called the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Brother Mike just read this imagery of the Garden of Eden when they was building the temple was found in Jerusalem. So now, Sister Britt, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Can you read Deuteronomy 28:63?
Okay, Deuteronomy 28:63. And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught, and ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it.
So notice, the Lord rejoiced over you to do good. He's also going to do it to do evil to you, destroy you. And he's going to pluck you off the land. Let's say it again. He's rejoiced to do good. He's going to rejoice to do evil. And once you are going through that, he's going to pluck you off the land. So you got good and evil, and then leaving the land. Brother Mike, what does that remind you of?
Adam and Eve.
That's the story right there.
Yep, the story of Adam and Eve.
They eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They get plucked off the land. They get plucked out of the garden. So Moses is using the story of Adam and Eve to explain to it.
We lost him. Just one moment. Try to bring him back. There you go.
Once again, you got to understand, in this story, when Brett read it early, he was saying, when ye eat from a ye, that's plurality. And we're going to talk about the significance of that later on. But he didn't say thou as in speaking to a single individual. He said ye while he was approaching Adam. Adam represents mankind. But we're not going to touch on that just right now. So, brother Mike, can you read now Deuteronomy 30:15 through 19?
Sure. All right, Deuteronomy 30:15 to 19. See, I have set before thee this day life and good, and death and evil, in that I command thee this day to love the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments and his statutes and his judgments, that thou mayest live and multiply, and the Lord thy God shall bless thee in the land whither thou goest to possess it. But if thine heart turn away, so that thou wilt not hear, but shalt be drawn away, and worship other gods, and serve them, I denounce unto this day that ye shall surely perish, and that ye shall not prolong your days upon this land, whither thou passest over to Jordan to go possess it. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live.
So you have it right there. Moses said, I present to you life and good, death and evil. That's your good and evil right there. And then he told them, if they did not do what was commanded, then they would perish. That's death, everybody. So, when they partook of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they died. Because when they don't do the components of the tree that they partook in, they perish from the land. They leave. They're plucked up from the land. So that death was them not prolonging their life in the land. Just like when he told Adam, the day you eat of it, you shall die. And when he ate of it, he plucked Adam and Eve out of the land. So that death was going away from the presence of the Most High, going away from the blessings that he had given them and entering into the curses. So you got to understand, this is what's going on in Genesis. Blessings and curses. The story of Adam and Eve is expounding on what happens when they partook of the law or the tree he didn't want them to partake of. So now we know the backstory. We know the background of it. The background is they were supposed to live freely. They went over to the wives of the world, idolatry and all that stuff, the lust of the eyes, the lust of flesh, the pride of life. That made them perish from the land. So death was reigning in them because they was always in love with the world. Adam presented them to be in love with the world, and it went all the way up into Moses. And when Christ came on the scene, he introduced them how to love the Father and be what the Father wants them to do and take off the lust of the world and put on the Spirit. So now, let's go to what we're supposed to be here today. I had to get through the backstory for us to understand the front story. So, Brent, can you read Isaiah 66, 15 through 17? And can you read it slow? Isaiah 66, 15 through 17, and read it slow.
All right. For behold, the Lord will come with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. They that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the gardens behind one tree in the midst, eating swine's flesh, and the abomination and the mouse shall be consumed together, saith the Lord. For I know their works and their thoughts. It shall come that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory.
Okay, so right there. And then you ask somebody what that's talking about, they'll tell you that's about today's time period and people eating pork and pig and mouse and mice and etc. They make it be about today's Christian church or the Catholics or whatever they try to make it be about. But now, we know the backstory. First of all, Brother Mike, what does the garden represent?
The temple, heaven.
Bingo, the temple. So this is going to be taking place inside of For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh. So now, if I made the statement that everything goes back to the Garden of Eden, where in the Garden of Eden do we see something similar to a sword of fire?
With the cherubims?
That's exactly what it is. The cherubim has a sword of fire. Now, what does the cherubim do? What's the cherubim doing?
Keep them out.
I'll say it again.
It keep them out of the garden.
So it's guarding the tree of life, right? And it's making sure that nothing unrighteous can get a hold of the tree of life. So if something unrighteous comes against that, they have to go against the sword of fire. Christ has the sword of fire. The cherubim has the sword of fire. But let's go even deeper. It says, they that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the gardens behind one tree in the midst. So, I want to take it back to Genesis.
You muted.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yeah, I get you.
Yep.
I want to go back to Genesis chapter 2. Can someone read Genesis 2 and let's see here. Verse 9. Genesis 2, verse 9.
And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Where is the tree of life and the tree of good and evil at?
It's in the midst of the garden.
In the midst of the garden. In Isaiah 66, verse number, let me see, 17, where was the tree the tree that they was behind? What was it located at? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm trying to pull it up. Sorry.
Was it in the midst of the garden?
Yeah, I'm guessing it's in the midst.
Yeah. So now, do we get where we at now? So both of them are in the midst of the garden. So this is my question. We don't have to go back there. What did Adam and Eve do behind the tree?
They ate.
And they ate first, remember? And then they heard the presence of the Lord. So what did they do?
They realized that they were naked and they sewn the fig leaves. And then they hid from the Lord.
They sewed the fig leaves behind the tree. What's happening in Isaiah 66? What are they doing behind the tree? Isaiah 66, 17.
They're purifying themselves.
Sanctifying themselves and purifying themselves. What did Adam and Eve do behind the tree?
Covering themselves.
Which is another word for what?
Atonement.
What does the atonement do?
It hides your sin, covers your sin.
So does the atonement purify you?
Yep.
So Adam and Eve was trying to purify themselves behind the tree in the midst of the garden. In Isaiah 66, they're trying to purify themselves in the midst behind one tree in the garden. So then, what did Adam and Eve actually do to make them have to? What did they do that made them want to put the fig leaves on them? What action did they do?
I'm sorry, ask the question again. My apologies.
What? You got what action did Adam and Eve do in order to make them want to sow the leaves?
Oh,
the fig leaves.
They ate. They ate of the tree of the good and evil.
They ate from the tree of good and evil. What are the people doing in Isaiah 66 and 17?
Eating swine's flesh.
So they're both eating, right?
Yep.
So it's the same exact story. If the law is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that means that these people in Isaiah 66 is doing the evil portion of it. And we can draw the conclusion, since they're by the tree or by the altar, it's something dealing with idolatry. So Isaiah 66 is just the retelling of what happened in the Garden of Eden.
So there's idolatry. So there's idolatry in the garden then.
Well, it will be love of the world. So, flesh, all that stuff.
Yes,
but it's the same law.
Got you. That's fire.
So what's going on in Isaiah 66 is a retelling of Genesis. Now, who would have known that nugget that Isaiah was actually piggybacking off of what Moses said? So now, let's read Daniel 1 and 2.
All right, Daniel 1 and 2. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand.
Sorry, Daniel 12, 1 and 2.
Oh, my
bad. Apologize. Daniel 12, 1 and 2.
I should have known that.
Yeah, my bad.
My bad. Hold on. Let me get to it here. Daniel 12. 1 and 2. All right. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt.
So during this time of trouble, we got Michael standing up, which is an angel, and he's standing up for the people. Some people are delivered, written in the book of life. So what does that should make us think about?
Tree of life.
The tree of life, yes, sir. So now, notice he said, many in the dust will awake. Where did Adam come from?
The dust.
Okay, so now, when the tree, right? Bit the fruit of the tree. Let's go what it says in
You're in the matrix.
Give me 1 second to pass. Give me 1 second to pass through. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Genesis 3. Can someone read Genesis 3 and verse 7?
Genesis 3, verse 7. And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons.
So I know we done went over this before as a group, but I want to touch on it again. When it says eyes open, what does that mean to you?
Resurrection. You're talking about the awakening?
Resurrection, 100%. There you go, awakening. It's an awakening. When your eyes is open, you are awake. So as soon as their eyes was open, what did they do?
They hid themselves. They knew they were naked.
So what did they do?
And they sewed the fig leaves together. They tried to sanctify themselves.
So them being naked, and then they wanted to clothe themselves, that means that they was what?
They were in contempt. You're in the matrix. You're in the matrix.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay, think about it on a time period. If a person is naked and they put clothes on, what do they put clothes on?
They're ashamed.
Bingo. So why would they put on the fig?
They was ashamed. They realized.
So in Daniel, it said, many will awake to being ashamed, to shame and contempt. When Adam and Eve woke up, they woke up to being shameful. So Daniel is actually piggybacking off of the story of Adam and Eve. When Adam and Eve woke up, when they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they were ashamed. In Daniel, when the people wake up from the dust, they are ashamed. But why are they ashamed? Because they have received knowledge of good and evil. So, they are being tested or judged off of the information that they received. It happened in Isaiah 66. Now it's happening in Daniel. They were being judged because they broke the covenant. They transgressed the law. So the curses had to come upon them. That's the death. So, the story of people not choosing the right path, going after the love of the world, and then resulting in their downfall, has occurred throughout the Bible. It occurred throughout history. So that's what the Bible was going through, each story. Everybody could have chosen the correct path, but they chose the love of the world, and when they chose the love of the world, they needed a law to govern them while they was in the love of the world, but that law had wrath that came with it. So they all went through that wrath because they chose works instead of faith. They chose to do the things outside of what the Father wanted them to do naturally. Is this making sense?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
y'all, I know it's going to make sense to the audience that's listening. All right, so now, we're done with showing how this is the retelling of the Garden of Eden again, the Eden narrative. I want to end it with these tenets right here. I want to prove that the Garden of Eden was actually a mindset, and a lot of people went through it. So now, and I want to show how a person actually reaches the Garden of Eden. Can someone read Ezekiel 28, 12 through 13?
All right. 12 to 13. Son of man, take up lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou sealest up the sum, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle and gold. The workmanships of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. Wow. You breaking up. Try to leave and come back in.
Destroyed. So, right now we're just showing proof that this is going to be actually a state of being, a state of mind. Can someone read Ezekiel 36, 35?
36. All right. And they shall say, This land that was desolate is become like the Garden of Eden, and the waste and desolate and ruined cities are become fenced and are inhabited.
So we have, and just like the king of Sodom, he was said to be in Eden, and then he was being brought down. Notice here, a desolation occurred. And after the desolation occurred, then a renewal, a.k.a. I'm going to make the desolate places like the Garden of Eden, which means they go through something bad, the desolations, the war. And then, after the war, the realization of it's going to get better, if that makes sense. The realization of they went through the worst part, now it's going to get better. That puts them in a mindset of them being in the Garden of Eden. Can y'all still hear me?
Yeah, I get you.
So a lot of people might say, hey, that don't make sense right there. So let's show again. Let's go to, can someone read Joel 2 and 3?
A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness, yea, and nothing shall escape them.
So we have a destruction that's occurring behind them, but what's in front of them? The Garden of Eden. All of the evil things have passed.
Going in and out. You're still in the matrix. Aiden, it ain't.
It said he's up and
You back. You back.
So when the bad things happen, they realize, they accept the bad things happening, then they know now nothing but good stuff can happen. Because usually, when something bad happens to you, then I just ask anybody else, when something really bad happens to a person, spiritually, what do they usually do?
Run to God. I would hope so. But...
Run, bingo. What you think, Britt? She might be absent right now, so you're right. Run. Say it again.
I said I agree with Brother Mike.
Okay. Big and I agree with both of you all also. As soon as something bad happens, they run to God. And when they run to God with all of their heart, with the supplication, they are now ready for the blessings from the Father, putting them in a Garden of Eden state. Because now they're relying on the Father. They have faith that the Father will listen to them, that He will heal them. They have faith that He will go through, He will bring them through. They're not like Adam and Eve, not believing on the Father, wanting their own wisdom, but they believe on the Father now. Notice, something bad has to happen before the people enter into the Garden of Eden. So let's show you again. This will be the last one. Go to Isaiah 51 and 3.
For the Lord shall comfort Zion. He will comfort all her waste places, and he will make her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness shall be found therein, thanksgiving and the voice of melody.
So the waste places, how do they have to go through waste places? They have to go through desolation, have to be destroyed. And when they are destroyed, the people turn back to the one living God, trusting in the God, having faith in the God, now bringing songs of gladness, songs of praise. In that scenario, they are now back in the Garden of Eden with their God, praising their God, relying on their God. They have to go through something tragic, and then they enter back into the Garden of Eden. If you don't notice what happened in Genesis, it was a lot of chaos in the beginning, with the darkness, the light, the earth was without void, and all that stuff. It was a lot of chaos in the beginning, and then the Garden of Eden was planted. What happened? The Israelites, they had to go through all of the tragedy in Egypt. And then what? They were supposed to inherit the promised land. But then they do the idolatry, and then they start dying. But besides that, how did they get hold of the promised land? The promise of Eden. They had to go through what was spoken of, or what happened with the Egyptians. They had to go through all of that. What about Christ? In order for Christ to go inside the Garden of Eden, in order for Christ to get the new body that never died, in order for Christ to demonstrate he defeated death, he had to go through desolation and destruction. In order for the church to prove that they was ruling and reigning with Christ, they had to go through martyrship first. How do the Father say, everyone that he loved, he was chastised, and he will take them through the fire, and they will come out purified. This is a theme that's found all the way in Genesis. So when you see what's going on, notice what happened in Isaiah 66. Isaiah 66 is the bringing in of the new heaven and the new earth. But what's happening? People are being destroyed in the old heaven, in the old earth, because of their idolatry, before being established inside of the new heaven and the new earth, before the gospel is taken to all people throughout. Those people had to be destroyed first. They had to go through what Adam went through. In order for the tree of life to be placed in the garden on both sides, in the book of Revelation 22, Adam first.
You're in the matrix. Breaking up. You're breaking up.
I know that really ain't gonna be able to hear me.
You back.
Okay, so I know I'm gonna get ready to wrap it up because I know we ain't gonna be able to hear me. But so when you see in Daniel 12, what's happening? A time of tribulation, a war coming, destruction coming, and when that destruction comes, when that war comes, what happens? People are waking up. Some to everlasting life. That's the tree of life. Some to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But the marker is destruction. The destruction. It was the destruction that brought the everlasting life. The understanding that there was an everlasting life. It brought the wisdom that they have to follow. It brought the supplication, the praises, the prayer, the faith. It brought all of that through destruction. So hopefully that explains it. So Brother Mike, Sister Brenda, if y'all want to elaborate on anything, please do, and then we can end the recording.
I just wanted to ask if you would consider, so the serpent in the garden would be considered a either like trial or time of difficulty, I guess, right? Because the Lord allows those things to happen so the people can be tested. And then instead of them turning to faith in God through this time of testing, they rely on themselves, right? So you would consider that the snake being that.
Well, Philo actually said the snake represents pleasure. So I would say that personal pleasure, which is
Oh, you went out a little bit. You going out. I can't hear you. Oh, you back.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you back.
Okay, then I'm gonna stop here at the stop sign before I turn over because it's gonna get real bad after I just turn. So I'm stopping in the middle of the road real fast. So the pleasure itself, it represents the serpent, and we know the pleasure is the love of the world. And according to First John, there was the lust of the eyes, it was the lust of flesh, and the pride of life. So this pleasure would be the serpent. So they actually went through that, causing them to not rely on the Father, but themselves. It's like a personal trial. It is
got you. I appreciate that. So I got you. So I'm gonna end the recording there. If anybody wants to hear, I see Stephen, you at the bottom there, and Josephus, if you guys want to hear the full lesson, it's gonna be on either AOSD Chandler on YouTube or Resurrection Prophecy Kingdom on YouTube. You'll see the full lesson there. Thank you for joining. Appreciate your time, and God bless.